So when I was in medical school, me and the other brown girls, we used to get together for a potluck. And so fast forward now, we're all well established in our careers. I got together, and this one colleague I have, she's actually a teaching physician out in the Midwest, doing extremely well. I go to conferences, people are talking about her. She said, back in those days when we were getting ready when we were doing those potlucks, she's like, that's when I looked forward to eating. And she's like, you guys were so wealthy and I wasn't. And I was just thinking, I mean, it just grabbed me in my heart because I'm like, I was in the same situation where I was borrowing money to eat, but I was not wealthy. I'm, maybe projecting something on the outside, but I wasn't wealthy. And if we'd been talking back then, we would have found, some commonalities, some support for each other, just to know that like we're not in isolation. But because of the culture where it's like really silent, it's not what we're putting forth. There is all this like quiet, let me fix it. I'm a fixer, I'm a physician, I know how to fix it. Let me fix it by myself. And when it's not working, all these noble goals that we're trying to get to, putting our kids through college, supporting our families, extended and immediate, building these beautiful legacies that my clients describe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, let's get at it.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining me this week. My name is Bianca Ariel, and you're listening to Recalibrated Vision. And we have Dr. Camille Upchurch with us here today. So I was just briefing Dr. Camille on, the whole consensus of the show. And of course, as you know, I interview physicians and healthcare visionaries on their transformation from career to calling. But one of the things that stood out to me for her was that she is educating on the money space, which I don't see a lot. I see money coaches all the time. We always hear rhetoric around how to make money online and building wealth online and things of that nature. But what I love about her is she's specifically speaking to what a lot of us are struggling with is really paying down debt, especially debt in correlation with what we wanted to do to pursue our dreams, right? And so I really want to kind of get into her own personal journey, but also provide some insights around, pitfalls, beliefs, things around money in general, and see if she can provide us some education today. So, Dr. Camille, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Of course. So, Dr. Camille, you are currently working as a physician, but you are also helping other physicians really pay down debt. So, my first question for you is, when did you realize that money was holding you back from moving forward in your life?
Realized pretty early. I think it was in medical school when, at that point in my career, my financial literacy was pretty low. I wasn't really concentrating in medical school on the debt that I was accruing, but somehow I did realize that there was a problem. I'm not sure if it was the dodging calls from creditors or if it was the maxed out credit cards, but there was something that clued me in that, something wasn't quite right. I needed to do better. So I actually asked for books on financial literacy, on personal finance, um, for anybody who was joining me to celebrate my graduation from medical school. So I got a few books. I started reading them. I think the first one I read was Personal Finance for Dummies, that black and white
Mm-hmm.
series, black and yellow series of books. And the book for me at that time was pretty dense, but I made a commitment to myself that, I'm going to do better every year than the year before. And I
Mm-hmm.
recommitted to that many years in my adulthood. So when I was done training, I had hundreds of thousands in debt. Lots of doctors do. Unfortunately, that's not abnormal. And just tried everything that I could to get rid of debt. Nothing was working. Fast forward many years, like 15 years, after asking financial advisors and doing everything I could, I locked in on a strategy that worked phenomenally for me. And so I had $98,000 left to pay off, and I was planning to pay it off in 5 years. I applied this strategy, which is the strategy I teach, and it was gone in 7 months. I was debt free, except for my mortgage. So that was a very empowering journey for me. All the gains I had, I just find myself I'm wanting to share that with any physician who's ready for a money transformation. I've
Mhm.
since been able to build a multiple seven-figure portfolio and just really want physicians to know that this is something they can do.
Yes, well, first and foremost, I love that when you graduated college, you asked for money books. That was amazing. Most people ask for money, but you were asking for books about money. So were you always someone that was really curious about, financial freedom in general? Or it just, in medical school, the first thing you thought of was like, okay, I want to get out of debt? Because that's not necessarily the first thing we think about. We think about, okay, how can we get a job? We don't even really think about our student loan debt.
It's so interesting because back then, like I said, my knowledge about money and what was possible for me was really minimal. I think what I was mainly experiencing was a lot of embarrassment, a lot of shame, a lot of fear. So, of course, I wasn't going to enter any room and say, I have 7 maxed out credit cards. I look great, but all these credit
Mm,
cards I have to the mall are maxed out. And, creditors are calling me and I'm repeating behaviors that I see my mom doing, avoiding these calls. And I was just really heavy with embarrassment and shame. And I think for a lot of doctors, we think, I'm going to graduate from medical school. I'm going to start earning some kind of living in residency, and then it's going to go up from there. But I'm not really thinking that I'm going to be like weighed down with this burden of debt that's going to feel so heavy. Although I've accomplished so much in the money space, I feel so low. And I
mm,
think that's what I was experiencing at the time. I literally didn't even have any idea of how to do things differently,
mhm,
but I wanted to. And, so
mhm,
I, asked for books about personal finance. It's very interesting because I hadn't seen anything different in my life as far as folks getting rid of debt or getting rid of debt quickly.
mhm.
I just saw, you want something, you borrow to get it. You want a car, you borrow. You want a home, which I still have a mortgage, no shame, but I'm
Yes.
just saying, everything that I knew was you borrow. You need a new outfit, you don't have money in the bank, borrow. And I was just looking to shift that.
I love that. I love that perspective. So you said that, well, one of the things you said was you saw your mother or the things that you experienced in your childhood, you saw some of the repetitive behaviors and you wanted to kind of break that cycle because you had to know when you were in that environment that this is not like this doesn't feel free to you, right? This doesn't feel peaceful. And that's something you were starting to experience even after an adult, after you've had all these accomplishments. And I'm so grateful that you shared your feelings around shame and embarrassment because when you have a prestigious role or you're making these six figures, everybody around you feels like you have it all together. They're probably even coming to you for support and help when you are yourself struggling to really kind of make it work. And I was just having a conversation with my partner actually yesterday, and I was like, the first time I felt free is when I downsized and I received a paycheck and I didn't pay the entire thing to my rent, right? It was like the time that was the first time that I actually had extra money left over, and that was such a freeing moment to me to know that it was possible,
Yes.
because you're making all of this money, but you're still living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, and it's like, "How is this happening?" Right? And so it's a kind of like you took the initiative to really put, the first step forward and really fixing that early on, which you really don't see. Another misconception, and I guess we can kind of dive into it, is that physicians, they're the highest ranks in the healthcare industry and they are making all this money, but we really don't talk about the debt that they're experiencing. Do you have these conversations with your peers and your colleagues at that time, or how was your community?
So, so this is another interesting thing that you're bringing up, kind of the community of doctors and the conversations we're having about money, which largely is non-existent. Largely, we do not get together. I'm not saying that it's never done. It's not the norm. We're not getting together and talking about how we're creating financial legacies. We're not talking about how we are learning about getting rid of the debt that we're burdened with after school. There's just kind of the norms. the norms that, yes, you graduate, yes, you have debt, and it takes 30 years, 20 years. If you're doing really good, it takes 10 years to get rid of it. Everybody knows that. And we don't really question that. Um, I think it was very revealing for me. For one, I do, social media posts so folks can know that I'm offering these services and can help them. And for one of the posts, I'm like, what are the top 10 professions as far as becoming millionaires, developing seven-figure wealth? And for the top 10, physicians weren't even on the list. We are very educated, um, high income earners, but overall, how we manage our money, there's just a lot of room for improvement. And I think what's more meaningful to me than we can do better is for a lot of doctors, it actually creates a lot of pain, a lot of suffering that we do not have to be struggling with. A lot of, things we want to do for our families, like you hinted at earlier. Our families think what we think sometimes, which is, I'm going to graduate from medical school, make multiple, six figures. When I'm practicing as an attending, money won't be a thing. And, we're trying to support ourselves, support our families, and really haven't really nailed down the basics of, not borrowing anymore, of how to build savings, how to support ourselves and our families well. But I think there are just some basic principles once we learn them, practice them. They are so easy, so simple. So I just really love, you know, teaching that to physicians. And I think for me, you referenced your journey with experiencing financial freedom. When I had finally become debt free, except for my mortgage, um, there was this program in my son's elementary school. He's now like starting college, but at the time he loved this program. It was like the lunch bunch. He got to eat lunch in the library. He came home from school talking about it every day. Next year he goes to school and the program is gone. I felt empowered enough to have a conversation with the principal, and the principal revealed to me that, yeah, we stopped the program. It was a budgetary decision. And I dared to ask, well, how much does it cost? He told me. I wrote a check and brought that reading program back to the elementary school. For me as a mom, I just felt so good. I can't describe about what I was able to bring back for my son. And I'll never
Yes.
know how many other kids in that school benefited from that reading program in some way. But it switched something very powerful in my brain that, if I can do this for my son, when other women experience this level of financial freedom, what can they do for their families and for their communities? And that
Hmm.
really just drives me forward. I just want women to learn this, this power,
Yes.
this degree of empowerment.
And I can see how this can be beneficial for everyone. One of the things you said is, you go to school and then you kind of accumulate all of this debt and you really don't question it, right? So we're just taught, get on the pay as you earn program. We have 30 years. We don't know what the government's going to do. You don't even know if it's going to be, dismissed or what have you. So just pay your minimum and just keep living life.
Yeah.
And we're focused on how we can make more money, more money. We don't focus on how do we get out of the debt that we are already in. And so what do we need to talk about to really have that conversation on how sometimes paying off your debt is really the financial freedom that you're looking for, not necessarily starting a business or looking for moonlighting or looking for other ways to make money. Like let's talk about like how do we get into that kind of consensual mindset?
Yeah. So I've kind of built this construct and this framework that encompasses what you're asking about. So when I start working with clients, I'll meet them wherever they are, and they fall in like different places as far as where they are with their financial literacy and even with their wealth. But the first thing, number one, is just getting your finances organized, just knowing like what is coming into the household every month, what's going out every month, just starting there. Once you kind of have that foundation, like I know what's coming in, I know what's going out, I know what's left over, then look at the debt. It should be shocking. It's not shocking for me anymore. I understand that this is where people are, but some people don't even know the number, like the total debt burden that they have. So then look at that. That's number two. debt liberation. So you've got it organized. That's number one. And then look at the debt number two and come up with a strategy to get rid of it very quickly. And I call the strategy the debt escalator. It has different names in different circles, but it's just starting with the smallest principal going up to the largest one. And then third, building your wealth reserve. So once you have organized everything, you've got your debt under control, what do you have in the bank? You can't get rid of debt without having a little in the bank. You've got to have something, or you'll find yourself in a cycle. But that wealth reserve comes when you're debt free. It's so easy then to build up savings for with a purpose, not saving for the sake of saving, but saving with a purpose. So maybe I'm saving for my kids' college. Maybe I'm saving for my retirement. Maybe I'm saving because I need a new car. And then the last part of it is legacy. And I call it affluent strategy, but this is what is your money legacy? Right? For some of the clients I work with, it has a lot to do with their children, what they're teaching their children, what their children will learn. And that is powerful. I referenced earlier everything I learned, whether it was nothing at all about money. I learned from my mom just because I was at her heels. I was learning what she was doing. I was watching and repeating it, even though I didn't want those results, but that's all I knew. So that legacy, that intentional legacy, that philanthropy, how we're giving, how we're changing our communities is the last step. But yeah, having a strategy for getting rid of debt, looking at it, knowing the numbers is really important.
Well, thank you so much for kind of breaking down the process. I agree with you. I think that we're so busy in our everyday, strive to kind of just, wherever you're at in your career or business, just ultimately survive, that we really don't even take the time to figure out how much debt we're in. But I think that you hit it earlier when you said there's also like this hidden component where it's like you're shameful, you're embarrassed about it, you're fearful about it. You're using your current situation to really analyze where you're at and not really establish how far you can go. And so you're kind of ignoring the issue altogether in order to kind of continue to keep up. When really we don't take the time to really go back and say, okay, like, let me clean up this mess so that I'm not always in this position where I feel like I'm drowning. And it's shameful and it's embarrassing because you're educated, you're making all this money, but you're not managing it properly. And essentially you just end up, it's all relative. You end up in the same position as any other person when really you feel like you've done all of this work to really, accomplish what it is you truly dream of. And so I think that liberating yourself from debt is, even though it could be a very fearful experience, is something that we really do need to sit down and take into consideration. Now, one of the things you said that when you graduated college was that you asked for, money finance books and then you read Personal Finance for Dummies. So, do you remember any other books that you read, you kind of took into consideration that you read? And then, like, maybe like any other coaches in the marketplace as well? Because I kind of want to go deeper in like what the resources are out there and what is missing in the marketplace as well.
Sure. So, I really, I love reading, first of all, and I love like, self-improvement. That's like the number one thing I go to. Sometimes I have to be like, Camille, you can read for fun too.
Yeah.
Just plain fun,
Yeah.
fiction, stuff that makes no sense. So I did read, Personal Finance for Dummies. I read, David Bach, Automatic Millionaire, and then he has like a whole set of books around that, like the Automatic Millionaire Woman and others. I read books by Susie Orman. I read a couple of books by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and some others. He has one when I started in entrepreneurship about like the quadrants. Um, what are some The Millionaire Next Door is one of my favorites. I read and reread that book. Actually, recently I read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And that book is about compounding effects by small little actions over time. And Darren Hardy's actually talking about life, but it is so applicable to what we need to do with our money to make change. So I could go on, but I think those are some of the really salient ones. And I really, I'm a strategy girl. The strategy comes easy for me, and I think it's what people are not doing that kind of gives them the results that they have. But I understand too that what we're choosing to do or not do starts with what we think. That's the genesis of everything. And that's where the coaching comes in. These feelings of being embarrassed and shameful, those are optional. It comes naturally sometimes because of society messages that we're getting, societal messages. But really, wherever you find yourself with your money is really where you're supposed to be. That's the perfect launch pad. It's the perfect platform. That's the starting place that you don't even have to argue with. You're put there because there's skills you don't have. And that's why you're there with the debt, with whatever. Once you learn certain skills, then you can get to the next level, but you really won't learn the skills that you don't have unless you kind of address where you are. So I never, it's not I did start with shame, fear, embarrassment. A lot of us do, but that is optional. It's really not how we have to look at it. The great opportunity for physicians is like our income, our intellect. Boy, we know how to follow a plan, make a plan. That's what we do in our careers. So there's so many positives and, so very easily we can get from where we need to be. But first we have to kind of look at some things, how we're thinking about some things, be willing to be creative, be willing to focus. So many docs feel like they're behind the eight ball. So
Mhm.
they start doing eight things at once instead of focusing on the one important thing. And that's like really the best starting place for a lot of physicians. You
I
asked
love.
about coaches, and I'll be honest with you. For a long time, I was like really into Dave Ramsey. And actually, I taught his class, Financial Peace University. Um, but I could not be in integrity with myself too much when I was listening to him sometimes because he spends a lot of time talking about how stupid physicians are and how they don't know what to do with money. And the way that he talks about it really left me feeling like, wow, I know my colleagues. I know where we're coming from. I know we don't, we go to medical school, we don't get the money side of it. And so there's just something unique about us that just wasn't being addressed there for me. So, what I try to do is coming from a place that accommodates everything that's unique about doctors, how we work, you know, um, these long shifts depending on what field you're in. And what we bring to the table, which is like a lot. So it can be easy to turn around. We just have to like learn the skills and address the mindset part as well.
Yeah, you come from a place of empowerment, right? And not criticizing, right? And one of the things that stood out to me, what you just said is where you are with your money is exactly where you're supposed to be, right? You just have to acquire the skills to do so, just like with anything else. So anybody who has, the personality to acquire skills in medical school certainly has the
That's
capability to
it.
acquire the
Yeah.
skills to manage money. So it's
Yes.
really not stupid. It's just you have to understand who your avatar is, who that customer is, and understand what it is that they are experiencing in their everyday life and,
Yeah.
the opportunities that have been presented to them. Because most of the time, these are the things that you're being delivered. Like you said, physicians are great at coming up with the plan and following it, but the plan just has to be in place, and then you have to work with someone to really fully execute. So I don't think the skill set is really the problem. It's the feelings behind it, right?
Yeah.
And that isolation, not having that community to really discuss these things about, because you may assume that you're an individual in the situation. Maybe you feel like you're the only one that mismanaged your finances when your colleague down the, hallway is going through the same thing. And I
So
do realize,
Bianca,
go ahead. Yeah.
I'm not going to interrupt her, but I'm so interrupting
Yeah,
you for
yeah,
this one.
yeah, go ahead.
So when I was in medical school, me and the other brown girls, we used to get together for a potluck.
Hmm.
And so fast forward now, we're all well established in our careers. I got together, and this one colleague I have, she's actually a teaching physician out in the Midwest, doing extremely well. I go to conferences, people are talking about her. She said, back in those days when we were getting ready when we were doing those potlucks, she's like, that's when I looked forward to eating. And she's like, you guys were so wealthy and I wasn't. And I was just thinking, I mean, it just grabbed me in my heart because I'm like, I was in the same situation where I was borrowing money to eat, but I was not wealthy. I'm,
Mhm.
maybe projecting something on the outside, but I wasn't wealthy. And if we'd been talking back then, we would have found, some commonalities, some support for each other, just to know that like we're not in isolation. But
Mhm.
because of the culture where it's like really silent, it's not what we're putting forth. There is all this like quiet, let me fix it. I'm a fixer, I'm a physician, I know how to fix it. Let me fix it by myself. And when it's not working, all these noble goals that we're trying to get to, putting our kids through college, supporting our families, extended and immediate, building these beautiful legacies that my clients describe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, let's get at it. But
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something about, where do you think the shame you think it's generational? Like,
The shame is generational. It's messages in society. It's like all these, what does success look like? And like, I'm done. I have a doctorate. I'm a physician, right? I'm a successful physician. So what does that look like? You- And it, you know, that's what people kind of latch into. Not to mention, we're human, we're studying as young people all these years, dedicating all this time, sometimes putting in work like quietly because we don't even want people to know how hard we're hitting it just to make the mark. And when it's done and we earn the degree and we are in practice, now we're supposed to live like a doctor.
mhm,
And that doesn't mean, keep your lifestyle down 2, 3 more years until this debt is gone. And then you can easily build and acquire the things that are meaningful to you. That's not the message. The message is, you look on TV, wherever you look, it's like, go get it,
mhm,
buy all the things. And so, yeah, that consumerism hits us as well. And then with our income, we can do the consuming on another level,
mhm.
but it doesn't necessarily serve us when we're battling debt.
Absolutely, so true. Thank you for
Mm.
interrupting me, and thank you for sharing me, because I know there's someone that's like, I feel the same way, and it's sometimes, I mean, that's what I love about, just podcasting in general, is just kinda hearing those internal stories so that you feel like you're not alone. And you're right. You guys are in a unique position, right? And, where people are looking up to you for the blueprint, and sometimes you don't feel like you have anywhere to go. So to have another physician to go to that has experienced these things and that can help you really kind of map out a plan to get out of this and from a place of empowerment and not embarrassment is super, super
Yeah.
impactful. Now, I know when I finished my MBA program, I went to a financial advisor and I was like, "Look, I have like 6 figures in debt and I'm about to start a career in the pharmaceutical industry and I want to know what should I do with my money? Like I need a plan." I remember it was at well, I'm not gonna say that. I remember sitting there and, he was like, "Don't worry about it." He's like, "As a matter of fact, I just sold my home because I was, so overwhelmed and I decided to rent and I'm at the happiest I ever been. You have years ahead of you. I wouldn't even worry about your money right now. I think you should just go ahead and live your life." That was the advice the financial advisor gave to me, right? And through little pockets in my life where I wanted to explore other things outside of my career, I realized that the advice out there wasn't necessarily exactly what I was looking for. Maybe I wasn't asking the right questions, but when you don't know, right? And so what was it about, the advice in the marketplace? I know you described, how you wanted to present the information, but what was it about the advice in the marketplace that was missing that really inspired you to come up with your own framework and ultimately help you specifically get out of debt?
So many things, but I mean, there are so many things along my journey that just, I would go to financial advisors. The first one that I went to was I read a book, and in the book it said, one of the things you should do to become wealthy is if you work with someone who has a financial advisor, ask them who the financial advisor is and go see that person. And I did just that. I was right around 30 years old and I made a stack of all my debts and dressed up pretty and I walked in the financial advisor and I'm like, hey, I'm so and so. This is my debt. And I, want to have this net worth by this age. I mean, that person didn't literally laugh me out of the office, but I was laughed out of the office.
Mhm.
So I'm like, that didn't work, so I'm paying my debt down year over year. And then I meet another financial advisor who was actually pretty good. And I'm like, I want to get rid of this debt. I want to be debt free. I don't want this debt. He's like, let me help you refinance it. We refinanced it. So that's when it's like, okay, we're going to pay it down over 5 years. Then I learned how to kind of focus on what I'm doing on one thing, not doing the college fund and the retirement and the debt payoff, and just focus on one thing. And that worked so beautifully. I told the financial advisor I was going to do that. And he said what your financial advisor said. He said, don't worry about it. Your income is fantastic. You're already investing. Why are you worried about this debt? You'll take care of it. It shouldn't be a thing. I told him, hey, we're going to just take a pause. I'm not going to be paying you these quarterly fees. I'll see you. And I blew my own mind because I didn't think the debt would be gone in 7 months. 7 months later, I'm debt free. I go back to see him. But I have a different voice now. I'm very empowered. I'm like, this is what we're doing for my 3 children's college. This is what we're doing for retirement. And he looked at me and said, can you teach your colleagues how to do this? He's like, this is fantastic. And so, just over years trying to become debt free, not finding someone who could focus what I'm doing and be honest and say, you know what? Yes, I sell financial products, but that's not what you need right now in this
Mhm.
moment. The financial products will be there. You can buy them later. But right now, let's just focus all your energies on becoming debt free so you can be a more powerful investor, which is what happens, when you focus and, put all your money energy 90% in one direction. Things can happen that are just mind blowing.
Mhm.
I mean, my clients just make such fantastic gains when they become debt free. They can't believe it, and it's just a beautiful thing to see.
Yes. And so it sounds like you kinda just left that office with, like, a different belief system and saying, like, "You know what? I don't think that we're aligned as far as, like, what it is I'm able to accomplish. I'm gonna see if I can go ahead and do this on my own, and then I'm gonna come back more empowered to really kind of put my strategy into place." Um
And and I think that's another thing that I teach my clients is you cannot delegate. You go to work, you earn the money. You're the one in the space earning the money. You get the paycheck. You stay in control of the money. You might not be doing what a financial advisor does day after day after day, but you have to direct whoever is investing for you. You have to come to the table with some knowledge, perspective, vision for where you're going, what your goals are, and how quickly you want to get there, how realistic it is. And so all of that background knowledge that you're going to go in and say, hey, I need your services for XYZ. This is where I'm trying to go. And then get some feedback, but be an informed participant. What I call it is you're the CEO of your household or co CEO. And when you go into that person, whomever the professional is, you need to be empowered and knowledgeable to guide them as they assist you get to your goals.
What you just described is the benefit of working with a coach because then it becomes co-collaborative versus just an advisement session to just kind of tell me where to go. Because then you'll always need this crutch, right? The coach is providing you as a co-pilot, is really understanding you and giving you the safe space to understand what it is you want to go and, providing your experience as well as your expertise to how to guide them while they stay in control. When you're going to these financial advisors, you're on their agenda, right? When you're working with someone who's in collaboration with you, you're in control and you're using, this person as a partner, right? Um I love that. So One of the things, I did to take control in my own personal journey, what when I was working in corporate was, downsize. I knew I wanted well, my agenda was different. It wasn't to get out of debt, it was to leave my career. So, one
Mhm.
of the things I was like, the first thing I need to do is get out of every situation that's not gonna allow me to do that. So, letting go and again, it's societal pressures, letting go of this luxury apartment, getting something smaller that I would probably never want to live in. But just adjust my finances in order to really make that happen. However, you said that you were able to pay off your debt within just 7 months because we have this idea like this is going to take years. So first thing I did was get rid of everything. So I'm curious, what was your strategy? And maybe that's not even the way that you have to go.
So, yeah, I think the path that a person chooses is very personal. It depends on what your overall goal is. But if you're trying to build wealth, um, like debt on a home is different. I don't really use the term good debt, bad debt. I don't really think that's helpful. But something like a house, as an example, the house is appreciating in value, it's going up over time. So that's one category of debt. But where you start, where you focus your attention and where you focus your energies really depends on what goal, what outcome you want. Um, but it's very hard to build wealth on a foundation of debt. The debt is eating away. You're paying interest for, the privilege of borrowing the money. When you're not making those debt payments, you can pay that to yourself. You can build interest in your own investments. And so being debt free is like a good place to start. Um, you can't really get on a debt free journey, I believe, unless you have some savings. It doesn't have to be large savings, but things are going to happen that you cannot predict. That is just life. That's a definition of life. And so
Hmm.
you need a little cushion, a little something so that I always use this example. You're backing out of the driveway, you're going to work, and you drive over two nails, right? You
Hmm.
need tires. So if you don't have a little something in the bank, you're going to find yourself relying on debt again. So there are just some little things to do, but it depends on where your goal is, where you're going to end up. If your goal in the end is to build wealth, it's going to be rare that debt is a part of that, a big part of that strategy. It gives us access to education, to a lot of good things. But once that is done and you have the education, you do not need the debt anymore. You don't need to live with it forever. What you need to do is get rid of it so you can get to the better things, the things that you always dreamt of doing, and your money can fuel those things when you have access to it. So I
This is
hope that
very
answers that
empowering. No,
question.
this is very empowering to as someone with student loan debt, it's very empowering to listen to because it's kind of like you're running away from it versus like sitting down with you. It feels like, okay, like we can get this done. Like, what do we have to deal with? And I go back to your saying where you are today is exactly where you need to be with money because, it really kind of puts you in this empowering space, right? Because you can, you kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I know that one of the greatest assets that we have is our income, right? Especially for physicians in which you help is, you have a great income. So this is something that you can accomplish fairly quickly. But
Yeah.
what about those if you can speak to what about those who because I work with physicians who are leaving their careers or they're actually just consulting and they're working on building their own practices and things like that. I know that you do a great job of meeting them wherever they're at. So whatever the situation, you definitely have to analyze. But do you have any advice for where they can start at today if they don't necessarily have the income already set in place?
So, well, before I worked with physicians, and I always knew I wanted to work with physicians because I am one, and those are the people who are in the spaces
Yes.
where I was moving. I did work with women in leadership. That's how I started. And I think some of the problems, physicians are a unique set, but some of the problems are the same. The avoiding, not knowing, I'll never forget the first call I got on with one of my very first client. And she did not know what her debt burden was. She didn't know. And so, of course, we're doing the numbers and, she looks at it and she realizes what it is. The next barrier, I think, is just the believability. So I am looking at the numbers and I'm very removed from it. It's, I'm just objective. It's not my debt. And so I can help. I'm not attached to it and I'm not linking it with emotions. And I can see how quickly it can be gone. But the other person, my client, is like, I just don't believe. I don't, that can't happen. What are you even talking about? So I think the first place for anyone to start really is just to know what you're dealing with. Knowing the numbers sometimes sheds light, and often what happens is it's not as bad as I think it is. I do not want to, you know, I don't want to overlook or minimize the experience that some have, because there are folks who are struggling because they have medical debt or other transitions or problems that happen where their debt is so big that, they might need to look at something like bankruptcy, for instance. It's just that that's not the situation most find themselves in. For most people, it's a matter of looking at the numbers and coming up with some sort of plan. It's really hard to get specific because every person brings
Yes.
something different, but I think knowing your numbers is definitely the place to start. And if you have nothing at all in the bank, zero savings, you do need to prioritize yourself first and
Mhm.
get something saved.
What do you
Um,
think is a reasonable amount of savings? I know is it a
I
percentage of your
use
salary or go
yeah,
ahead, sorry.
no problem. Yeah, excellent question. So what I recommend is 30 to 20 to 30% of your income for a month. Have that in the bank, 20 to 30%. Once you get that in the bank, if you're dealing with big debt, then you stop saving. You just leave it at that. If you use a little bit of that, you put it back in, but you
Okay.
leave that in the bank and then you hit the debt elimination part
So
if
are
you
you
have
saying
six-figure debt.
20 to 30% of the monthly income per month in general?
One
Like
No, for 1 month. You just put
for
that in the
just for
bank
1
one
month.
time.
Okay. Okay, one time. Got it.
So, if we're talking numbers and you earn $10,000 in a month, before taxes, you put $2,000 in the bank or you put $3,000 in the bank and you leave that at that number,
Okay. Got it.
okay? And it 2,000 is fine.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Now, depending on the amount of your debt, and then the next thing you need to do is just focus all your energies on the debt and becoming debt free, because everything else you want to do becomes infinitely easier once you
Mhm.
don't have the debt payments. So then you're stopping everything else. You're putting everything else on the back burner except for paying down the debt. You pay the minimum on everything that you need. You're taking care of your necessities, a roof over your head, transportation, eating. You take care of all the necessities. Everything else is on the back burner as far as retirement savings. If you have kids' college, everything else just waits. And then you pay that debt down.
When you mention retirement savings, what about like 401k? Like, is that like, if companies match, should I continue doing that? What are your suggestions with that?
So again, uh, um, what each individual brings to the table matters. And if your income is large enough, that may be the only tax shelter, the only way to mitigate the tax burden is by investing in retirement. However, you might even need to pause that in order to become debt free faster for a brief period of time. And when you look at the numbers, when you look at, okay, I'm investing $300 a month now in my retirement, but when I don't have a car payment, when I don't have any credit card payment, when I don't have this debt payment, I can invest 2,000 a month. It
Right.
just makes all the sense to just hold for a moment. I don't recommend, not investing in retirement for a long time, like 5 years, but for 2 or 3 years, it can make all the difference. And when you get back into it, you can regain some of that momentum.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So essentially what you do is you're kind of looking at the entire landscape, like, okay, what is the situation? And then you're giving them the space to really kind of identify what their goals are moving forward, depending on where they're at. And then you're really a partner in them with them and just kind of, mapping out what that strategy looks like. So having somebody tactical is beneficial, especially when it's something that's like, I don't even know how much debt I had, let alone like getting out of debt. But talk about some of the experiences because I know it's an emotional process. So what are some of the emotions that you were able to kind of partner with people on and really help them get through during the payoff process and then after they've actually become debt free?
Yeah. Uh, so liberation is the first word that comes to mind. And they for me, this work is so gratifying and so filling. I struggle even to put it into words, but I'm on the phone with a client and she's looking at her money and she's seeing what she can do. And first of all, I'm thinking of this one particular client. So she becomes aware of what the numbers are, and her debt is actually equal to her income. But now she has a plan of paying it off. And all of a sudden, like we get on one call, next week we get on another call, and she's telling me, like, I'm finding money. She's
Mm,
like, I had this account. I forgot about it. Oh my gosh. I used it and I paid off this whole credit card. So now that payment she was using for that credit card, she can apply to the next biggest debt. We get back on the phone and she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so like easy. I can't wait. I can't wait to get paid so I can, take care of this next debt." And, there's a lot of components to what I'm doing. So especially if you have large debt and you're going to be paying it off, say for 2 years, it's not only about paying the debt down and the joy that comes from that. It's also recognizing for yourself, where does your true joy, happiness, fulfillment, contentment, where does that come from? Because you need to identify and feed those things through the process. And often it has nothing to do with money. But if it's family and your family lives across the country, yeah, maybe we need to plan for that trip that you're going to take. And when are you going to take it? So, it's really like this holistic approach. But they get very liberated. Another client that I'm working with right now, when we met, she's like, I feel like my job owns me. And, I'm looking at retiring in 7 years and I don't know how I'm going to do this. And we looked at the numbers together and I kind of explained to her, like, your retirement is literally 2 years away. So I define retirement differently. It's not about an age. You retire when your investments make what you make when you go to work, or more than that. So when your investments are making what you need to live, you're retired. Even if you decide I'm still going to work, which is a good thing, you have purpose, right? But ever since she realized that, she's going to work with like renewed energy, a whole new way about her because she's like, I'm almost there. So yeah, it's really gratifying to see women achieve this.
yeah, like, especially when I came up with, my name for my company is Recalibrated Vision, is like you mentioned, is like we have all of these things presented to us in life and we don't question anything. And we don't realize we think that we have to change an entire situation in order to seek the fulfillment and joy that we actually desire. When we're in reality, we just have to change the way that we see things, right?
Yes.
And it's like I love how you describe like retirement is not about an age, right? Anything that's been given to us that we're not questioning, we have the power to reframe, which I learned from Dr. Yolanda, not unlearn, reframe. This another podcast, and really kind of look at it from a different perspective, and it can instantly put you in a different frequency, right? And it's like how
Absolutely.
you showed her that actually your retirement, she wanted to retire in 7 years. Actually, you're going to be retired in 2 years, and you don't even have to leave your job. That puts you in a different frequency and it gives you the empowerment that you had even going back to your advisor and being like, "Okay, here's what we're going to do with my children's college fund. Like, here's what we're going to do." It puts you in a different space. And so really leveraging the tools and the people that can help speak that into you and allow you to access what's already there is so impactful. So, this is so cool. I love that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Dr. Camille. So When we're talking about things that bring us joy, right? And I love how it's embedded in the process because you feel like this is going to be so tedious. I need to like eat tuna fish and ramen noodles for 2 years in order to make this happen. But we don't realize like if you have your income is an asset. So if you're in a position where you're still making this type of income, right? You're making six figures, you are in a positions where you can kind of, adjust accordingly and not give up the things that do bring you joy. And like you said, it doesn't have to be about money. So, what are some of the things that brought you joy? Like, what are some of the things that you splurged on your personal journey?
So for me, it really, the things that fill me up, are really not linked to money. And I think this is a mistake a lot of folks make in their wealth journey. They think that the wealth journey has to be very glum, very defeating, a very low point where you're like in a cocoon, because you're not spending money. And I think the mistake is linking money and equating it to these feelings that to be joyful, I need to spend, to be content, I need to spend. So for me, spending time with my family fills me up. I love things like cooking. I'm an introvert, so don't be surprised at any of these things.
Yeah.
Like going on a long hike in nature, working up a sweat and being by like some falls. It's crazy how many falls there are in the state of Maryland where I work, where I live. But something like that just lights me up. I love quiet time, just, sitting on my porch or sitting on the deck and like listening to birds and really just gives me a feeling of lightness. So being sure that I tap into things like that. I do enjoy a decent manicure, pedicure. I do you know so sometimes, and I do find sometimes that I'm coaching somebody and I'm like, okay, so what are the things, now that we've looked at all your expenses, what are the things, where do you see that you could maybe bring some more focus onto your current goal? And the first thing they'll say is, well, I guess I need to stop getting manicures and pedicures. How about these 8 TV subscriptions you have over here? You're
Right.
telling me you're not even watching TV. Can we, do that first? So, yeah, I think things like joy, happiness, and contentment they genuinely don't come from money. Money is a tool. It's very neutral. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. The things that we want, and we really just need to decide what are the very important things, right?
Hmm.
Use it for that. The things that don't mean so much, why are you spending money on it?
Right. And I think that some people may like also kind of dive into the fact that they want to be wealthy. So explain the difference between wanting financial freedom and wanting wealth, but then also not tying your joy and your happiness to money specifically, right?
Yeah.
Because it's giving you something you're not getting necessarily just from spending. Wealth is ultimately putting you in a position where you are going to actually find the ultimate freedom that you're seeking. So,
Yeah.
kind of go through the difference.
So I think, oh, this one is so loaded. And if I start going off on tangents, Bianca, you gotta rein me
Okay.
in.
Okay.
So I think it's really important to, you know, uh, you go to work. And for a lot of women that I know, we bring our everything, our all. We go to work, we put it on the line, we do what we need to do. We're bosses in the space sometimes. And then we get a paycheck and we're like, I don't know where to go from here. That is never okay. That is never okay. That's where you start when you get the paycheck to build what you want to build. So that's one thing. The other thing is, as you're making your journey, whether you have debt, whether you're already debt free, enjoying your life, enjoying every breath, enjoying love from the folks around you is like a non-negotiable. And if you're not doing that, you need to learn how to do that. Enjoy your physicality, your spirituality. So so you and I are of course talking about finances and wealth in that realm. But I think real wealth is composed of all of these things where you have a healthy social environment, where you have work or study that you enjoy, that's gratifying, where you have your physical health, where you have whatever your spirituality is, all of these things. And I feel like without, that emotional strength, without any of these, it's hard to be wealthy. When it comes to finances, we're often wanting to get to a place where we can enjoy our money without guilt. We want to take the trip. We want to shop and buy clothes that we enjoy. And maybe the price tag is up there. Okay, so what? If you can afford it and still eat, still do all the things that you need to do. And so this is what the work is about. It's kind of prioritizing, knowing where you are right now, taking care of that, and then what's the next step to get you to where you're going, to get
Mm-hmm.
you to that end point. For me, I love investing in real estate. I've been able to do that. I have children. I want to know that they're secure. I'm not worried about that at this point. We have certain goals that we want to get to that are very worthwhile. And so there's just a path to getting there.
Hmm. I love it. Thank you for breaking that down for us. And I'm just envisioning, like, I love, you built this 7-figure portfolio. Did you do it on 6 figures?
Yes.
Because that's another misconception. Because I work with, people who are wanting to access wealth because through a business, right? And anyone who really runs a business knows, like, you got a lot of work ahead of you, right? And, you really have to be connected to it and passionate about it, which is why I focus on, like, the actual calling, and what you're meant to do. But the idea that you can reach 7 figures through your income is not talked about enough. Is like, you can be on 6 figures and reach 7 figures. You don't necessarily have to open up a business. And that's not the only way you can access wealth. It's actually, debt management and becoming debt free, is what's going to get you there. Because even if you're acquiring, additional funds through or revenue through business, you're still sitting on this debt that's going to keep you in the same toxic
Yeah.
cycle.
Not to
Um,
mention, I mean, you asked me if I did it on six figures, and yes, many physicians make six figures or multiple six figures. But
mhm.
back to what I had said earlier, if you look up the top professionals who become millionaires, some of the professions, my mom was a teacher, some of the professions in that list don't start off with six figures. They don't make six figures. They may further in their career
Do you
or
remember
six
what
figures.
what professions were on that list?
So I believe, and I'm not looking at it right now, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
believe that the number one was engineers.
Okay.
Teachers was on the list. I thought it
Okay.
was interesting to find like people in the agricultural realm, like farmers and so on, were on the list. And then if I try to remember any of the others, right
Yeah.
now I
No,
can't.
that's very interesting. So, do you think it's becoming debt free and then investing properly is what kind of
Yes,
catapults them?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Saving and investing is how you build wealth.
Okay,
Bottom
saving
line.
and investing. And I know that you focus on, the debt component. Do you support like the investment component? I know you have to be like
Do
certified in.
very
Oh,
much.
okay.
And, the way I market my services, because it's where I started, and I know there are a lot of physicians in this situation, is that if you have six figures of debt, I can help you transform that into seven figures like I did. But some of my clients are no longer have debt. Some of my clients are in the middle of their careers. They've already taken care of their debt and they still are like, what do I do next? I don't know what
Yeah.
to do with my money, or their issues with money are coming from other spaces, not knowing how to participate in the household. They might be bringing the money in, but they literally don't know how to transform that into wealth. Or they have some dream they want to accomplish, something they want to do, and they don't know how to get from where they are to establishing that thing in the future.
Yeah. In business, we always have like categories for where our clients currently are, right? So you have the clients who are in need, and urgent and are completely aware of their circumstances. But then you also kind of have like the dabblers who, like, maybe like, yeah, I would like to get out of debt, but it's not really affecting me. I'm living the life. I'm taking my first class vacations. It's not really that serious to me. What do you say to those type of people who are like, I have debt, but it's really not affecting the way that I want to live. So I feel fine.
The first thing I want to say is get on a call with me.
Okay.
I offer free 60-minute strategy calls. But
Okay.
to be perfectly serious, I think that if you do not see debt as a problem, if you are enjoying your debt and thinking that that's the best that you can do, then it's really hard to show you how things can be different. I think that folks have to come into a recognition on their own, because it's just hard if you don't see a problem. It's hard to then show things could be better this way when you're like, this is, just how things are supposed to be. They're fine the way they are. And then there's nothing wrong with that. If that's your desire, if that's where you want to be, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just where you are.
Right.
Yeah.
And simple as that, right? It's like, we focus on the people who want to change, right? And
Yeah.
that
And there's so many of them out
yeah,
there who are just like,
exactly.
how do I, um, I may have mentioned this before, forgive me if I did, but when I got my first job as an attending, so I finished residency training and I get an attending, I'm looking at the fact that the payment I'm making on my student loan is equal to my mortgage payment. That was so unsettling because
Yeah,
my brain automatically went to, oh my gosh, if you didn't have the second mortgage payment, what could you be doing?
right.
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah, it's just having that awareness, and eventually, even if you don't find it a problem now, you're gonna have those situations where you're gonna be like, you're gonna have these aha moments, like, wait a minute, like this doesn't seem right, right? And it's like you have those that are just gonna kind of keep going on with the program, and then you're gonna have those people who are like, you know what, I want to change, and I just don't know how or where to
yeah,
start, and that's what keeps us stuck. So having this conversation with you is really empowering because not only we know that there's tactics out there, we know that there's books out there, we know that there's ways to get out of debt. We hear all of the gurus on the internet, and we're fed all of this rhetoric, but we don't really know which direction to go in. And one of the things I love about you is not only do you provide a simple plan, a tactical process, you're someone who you yourself are in this, we're in the same position, you got yourself out of it. You understand you don't have, besides you're providing this as a service, as a financial advisor, you don't have a hidden agenda to sell financial services. You are working in tandem with someone to actually help them accomplish their goal, not yours. And then, embedding the idea of joy and peace, throughout the process so it doesn't have to feel mundane, is really a different perspective that we don't get to hear a lot about. It's like, scale back, downsize, get rid of everything, sell everything, save $1,000, pay off all your debt. And, this is how you should sell your car. You should do this, you should do that. But there are professionals who work very hard to get in positions that they're in, who are making great money, who, with a simple plan, can really turn their six figures into seven figures without making a draining process. And you have the right to do that. It's your birthright. It's anyone's birthright, but anyone who has worked to get in this particular position, you should leverage that to get to where you want to go. So those are kind of the components that I picked up in the conversation that I felt were really truly enlightening. So thank you so much for sharing all of that information with us. So I really want to kind of dive in, like, how do people work with you? How do they contact you? Like, take us through what that process looks like so that we can start working on our, goal to financial freedom.
absolutely. So, I do offer 60-minute strategy calls. So if you're curious about what it might be like to work with me, you can get on LinkedIn. That's the main platform where you can find me, Camille Upchurch, MD. And either just send me a direct message, or there are links on there where you can directly book an appointment with me. That would be a great place to start. I'm also on Instagram, not as much these days, but at Camille Money Coach is another place where you could find me, send me a message. And um, yeah, and I'd love to work with anybody who's like ready for that transformation, ready to start figuring out who their future self is, and what they can do now to make sure that she is in the best place possible.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Camille, do you only, and is it Dr. Camille is okay, right? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that's fine.
Okay. Do you only work with physicians, or, you work with other women leaders in the past as well? So,
I have.
okay.
And so if you do want to work with me, if you're not a physician, I'll work with you. You just DM me, and we
Okay.
can talk about what that would look like. Yes.
And as a current practicing physician now, how do you manage, being a full-time physician and then also running a business at the same time?
Just have to be really, my calendar. It's all
Okay.
about my calendar. A lot of my coaching right now, although as long as I am able, I can make space. A lot of my coaching happens on like the end of the week, sometimes on Saturday. And I kind of start off filling in for my calendar, the things that I need to do to support my family. And then I also have a 9 to 5, and then I work in the business. But I can say honestly, I get so much joy, so much fulfillment from my business that it's just work that I love doing. And I
Yeah.
think next to that comes patient care. That's not what I do 9 to 5 anymore, is patient care. But when I do get the opportunity to see patients at bedside, that's like the next thing that I just love so much, that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely tell, like, obviously, with somebody with a portfolio like yours, running a coaching business has to be, part of your calling, right? It's completely fulfilling, even though it is a structured business. And I want to know, like, when did you feel called to actually serve people in this way?
Been doing this ever since I kind of learned how to manage my money. I think, and even in the process when I was learning, I was just never afraid to talk about money. And so my friends would come to me, "Hey, I'm doing this. What do you think?" Or, "My mom's living with me and this is happening with her retirement. What do you think?" And I would go away to conferences and strike up conversations. The next thing I know, I'm kind of, helping somebody navigate debt freedom. One day, I'm sitting on my couch and something just clicked in my brain. Like, oh, when people say, "What would you do if money didn't matter?
Hmm.
What's your passion? What do you love?" This is what they're talking about. Like, I've been doing it. So in that moment, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to be a lot more purposeful with it. I'm going to monetize it. I'm going to serve as many women as I can. And if that means getting uncomfortable, getting out on social platforms, talking, whatever, I'm going to reach these women who need to know that you can be way confident about negotiating about your salary. You can be confident about how you invest. You can be confident about buying investment real estate. You can be confident about supporting and being a co-CEO in your household, building wealth for generations, because whatever you do, like I learned from my mom, that's what your children are going to learn. And it's not what you're telling them, it's what they see you doing. That is what we're going to learn. So it's just so important. And I identify as part of the African American community. I was born in Jamaica, came here when I was 12. In our community, the need, like, I'm here for it. I'm here for it all day. Let me show you how you can get from where you are now to being wealthy. It's not that hard. And what is hard is trying to figure out six-figure debt and having peace at the same time. That's
So
hard. So, yeah, let's talk.
thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Dr. Camille. I'm so happy. I'm Jamaican too, by the way. My mother's Jamaican. um, but thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It is truly impactful. I love that you provided us with a different perception on like what it means to be debt free and what real wealth actually consists of. And hopefully that we can inspire others to start really, taking a look, taking the first step and just really taking a look at where you're at, because where you're at is exactly where you're supposed to be. And
Yes.
hopefully this conversation can empower you and inspire you rather than, for you to continue to live through embarrassment, fear, and shame, because those are feelings that both I and Dr. Camille have gone through. And so you're definitely not alone. So if you want to find Dr. Camille Upchurch, you can find her on LinkedIn as well as in the link in the prescription below. Thank you so much for listening in this week. I'm Bianca Ariel. This was Dr. Camille Upchurch, and you're listening to Recalibrated Vision. Remember to always and forever stay free. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.